Genesis 9, Covenant of the Rainbow. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give it all to you, as I gave the green plant. Only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely I will require your lifeblood. From every beast I will require it, and from every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you, and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, This is the sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you, for all successive generations. I set my bow in the cloud. It shall be a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow will be seen in the cloud, and I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it, to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all the flesh that is on the earth. Now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Then Noah began farming and planting a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away, so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. So he said, Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants he shall be to his brothers. He also said, Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. Noah lived 350 years after the flood. So all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Genesis 9 commentary. There's a couple of peculiarities and perplexities that I find in Genesis 9. And it's a regular theme in the Bible where there's going to be things where you're just not going to get. And this is definitely one of those moments where there's a couple of things here that are just not explicable. And we have to make decisions whether we believe and trust God or not. He has told us in advance there are going to be things we're just not going to get here, and we won't understand until we get to the other side. 1 Corinthians talks about that. It says that there are items we're going to see through a glass dimly now. So we know there's an answer on the other side of the glass. We just can't really picture it for what it really is. And so a couple of those are throughout this particular chapter. Before I get to those, verse 2, fantastic. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of every earth, blah, blah, blah. But really, verse 3 is what's important. Verse 3 is where we find out that those who are vegetarians or vegans because they don't want to hurt animals have lost their mind. It's totally fine to be a vegetarian or a vegan. There are certainly some very healthy aspects to that. And if you want to be a vegan or a vegetarian, as long as you're doing it for the health side of it or because it's some benefit that you enjoy or maybe because you just don't like meat, whatever the reason is, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with being in one of those two categories. Where it is wrong is you're simply a vegan for the reason that you don't want to hurt animals. God's very clear in this verse, and this does not end in the Old Testament. It's not only repeated in the Old Testament, but it's stated again and repeated again in the New Testament, both explicitly like we see here and then implied in many places throughout the Old Testament and New Testament where people are eating animals, consuming animals, and there is no issue with God on that. And more specifically, sacrificing animals and then eating them. So there's no question, there can be no question that a thinking person could read the Bible and think that God somehow abhors the killing and consumption of animals specifically for the purpose of consumption. Now, having said that, I don't find the killing of animals to be a sport. I don't think there's a biblical preclusion to it. I don't think the Bible takes exception to it. And I think because we have dominion over the animals, as long as that death doesn't occur with any amount of cruelty to them, you shoot them and you kill them hopefully in one shot, or if you screw it up and they're in pain, put them out of their misery. If you believe that killing animals for sport is okay, that's fine. There's certainly not, like I said, there's no biblical exclusion to that. And I don't think it's a sin or anything. But for me and my life, I don't think that's sporty at all. When we go into the jungle, when we're facing things that are bigger and badder than us, okay, use a gun. But don't tell me as you're killing deer that that's somehow a sport. You're shooting down, a deer that's however many yards away, has absolutely no defenses, and is not an aggressive animal to begin with. Now, you want to kill that deer with a bow? That's potentially entering the arena of a sport, but to sit incredibly far away with a gun and a scope and come on, shooting at a target like that and getting good at that, okay, but I don't look at that as a sport in my own life, and I don't understand why people consider that a sport. It's the same thing. It's like taking candy from a baby, or fishing out apples out of a barrel, or fish in a barrel. Sorry, that's the correct reference. It's fish in a barrel, man. I'm not saying it doesn't take skill to do that. There are plenty of people that'll pick up a rifle and couldn't shoot a deer to save their life. But why would you kill an animal to be able to prove that you do have that skill and you've developed into a really good talent? Why not shoot a target, and then make the target move? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But like I said, there's no biblical exclusion to it. And if you enjoy it, it's not like God hates you or whatever else. It's just not for me, and I don't get it. But having said that, I'd kill an animal in a heartbeat to eat. And I allow people to do that for me every single day. Now, where I think the two could converge is as long as you're eating the meat, okay. But if you're just out discriminately killing deer for sport and then letting them rot, no, I don't get that. Some of the exceptions, of course, would be when populations of animals have to be thinned, or and there's other things about raising animals and the needs for thinning herds or whatever else that I may not know, and I give exception to that. But just walking into the woods, shooting some deer and leaving, or cutting their head off and taking the antlers and the head home so you can brag and leaving the rest of it to rot, no. Either donate the rest of the body to some organization that's going to cut it up and dole it out for food, and then it's fine with me. But if you're just doing it to let the deer rot, give me a break. That's not sporty at all. Just my opinion, not a biblical perspective, just a personal perspective. What is interesting, though, after that, on a different subject, is verse 5, where it says, "Surely I will require your lifeblood." Now, before it gets to the part where in verse 6 where it says, if you kill someone, then you're going to be killed, which is essentially what that's saying in verse 6. Verse 5, before that, says, I'm going to require your lifeblood of you, and I'm going to require it from every beast. So every single living creature is going to die. And God's very clear about this. There is no escaping death. And the old phrase says that, there's two things you can never escape: death and taxes. And that's just not true. Plenty of people escape paying taxes. And even if you don't, the worst that can happen is you can go to jail for it. Now, I'm not saying that's pleasant, but I'm saying it's not like it killed you. But one thing you cannot escape: we are all going to die. And this is what baffles me about people that don't do their research and don't know anything about religion or claim to be agnostic, which I can respect people that are agnostic. I have no respect for atheists. It's an illogical position. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But I do not understand people that have no religion or think there's no way there could be a God. I don't feel like getting into the whole thing about intelligent design and how we would refuse to believe a house made itself, but we believe the earth can make itself. I mean, the amount of organization that happens on a subatomic level, then the organization that happens on an atomic level, and the organization that happens on a cellular level, and then a multicellular level, and then the full organism, and then the environment, and then the stratosphere and the atmosphere, and then the way the earth works with the moon and the sun, and the way the sun and the moon and the earth work with the solar system, and then the universe, the way all of that fits together. That's an accident. You're a moron, okay? You are a moron if that's the case. So anyway, the long story short is, how can you possibly believe that there's not a God? But beyond that, the deeper point is, how can you possibly not do the research? And those who claim to be atheists are making the statement that there is no God. It is not possible to make that statement from a logical perspective, from a scientific perspective. Now, while I personally believe, and my opinion is that science proves there's a God, I do concede the point that you can't really prove there's a God. You can infer, and I think God purposely leaves it just a little bit dim. He leaves the light just a little bit dim on that one and says, you're going to have to show you have a brain in your head, all right? I'm not going to come down, stand in front of you, and prove it to you. It's going to have to be from these different levels, from subatomic all the way to the macro of the universe. It needs to be obvious to you that there's a God, because I don't want robots, and if you need more proof than that, you're just not smart enough. Now, that's me speaking on behalf of God. I don't know that God uses those words, but that's just me using those words. Because even if you never get to the scripture that says your lifeblood is going to be required of you, everybody knows your lifeblood is going to be required of you. You are going to die. It is going to happen. Period. End of story. And look, I might even be willing to give atheists somewhat of a pass on their ridiculous position, but only on the basis that at least they took some time to think about it, okay? What I cannot give people a pass on is those who are, quote, spiritualists or haven't really done any research or not sure what they believe. Do you not realize that you could eat a piece of celery and a speck of that food, a speck of it, could get caught in your throat and kill you in under 5 minutes? That's how fragile our life is. How stupid are we that with all of eternity hanging in the balance in front of us, that there are actually people who could be killed by a microscopic piece of celery, and that could go for any food, obviously, and still don't properly land the plane of their thoughts and calculations as it relates to what happens in the afterlife. Which is why I said I can give at least somewhat of a pass to atheists, because many of them have really thought it through. Now, their conclusion is preposterous, but at least there was some thought process involved. And again, I use that word thought in air quotes and very loosely. But how do people do this? How do people know that they'll spend 80 years here and millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions and trillions of years dead and not do the research? You will spend and using the words overwhelming majority of your existence is not enough, but there's no words to put it into perspective. You will use the overwhelming majority of your existence in the position of gone, in the position of death. How could you possibly not do the research, especially when you've heard what may be on the line? Around verse 19 or so creates one of the very first and most significant conundrums and perplexities in all of Scripture that nobody has an answer for that's of any significant value, and that is, where did all the population come from? I mean, the Bible tells us from, Noah's family, but what about before that? Adam and Eve were created, and then the rest of the earth came from them, so were the kids sleeping with each other? What happened? There have been some theories proposed about that God created other people, and then they all ended up sinning. I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. Certainly possible, but I don't see that anywhere in the Bible. Another theory is that the bloodlines were so pure at the time that it didn't matter if children slept with each other. Not sure about that. So this is one of these things that just sort of is what it is. It's a perplexity that I don't understand, don't know the answer to, but can tell you that I trust God. And whatever the answer on this one is, we probably won't find it out until we get to the other side. And then the last thing in this chapter is one more of these perplexities, but it's not an international conspiracy level perplexity like the first thing I mentioned about where did all the people come from. It's just a personal complexity that bothers me, and I see this nuance all throughout the Old Testament. And it's just such a graceless era, and it's so frustrating. But with Ham uncovering his father's nakedness, no question what he did was wrong, okay? No question he shouldn't have been looking at his dad and, whatever else. But what bothers me about this, what really annoys the absolute snot out of me about this, is that there's no mention at all of how wrong Noah was. The Bible's clear that while drinking isn't wrong, getting drunk is. And, every form of getting buzzed or getting drunk, it's all getting drunk. But he was clearly wildly drunk. based on just what's written here, why wasn't he punished? Why wasn't Noah punished for what he had done? I understand why Ham was, and I don't disagree with it. What I struggle with is the lack of equality here and the lack of fairness. I don't know. Maybe God did something that just wasn't written in Scripture. Or, I don't know. But like I said, it's just one of these sort of personal complexities that bothers me.